Hey everybody, I miss you guys. I hope you miss me too. Today we're going to read a poem called Harlem by a guy named Langston Hughes. Now I don't want to talk about what is the poem about, who's the author, what's the history of. I don't care about any of that yet, quite yet. We will, but not yet. Trying to get my we're still practicing. All right. So what I want to do, the first thing that we always do when we get a new poem is we read the poem. Okay, so let's read the poem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Okay, so as we've been reading about poems, we've been thinking about imagery, we've been thinking about figurative language. We've also been starting to try to figure out why an author might choose to use any tool in their toolbox to convey meaning. So why did the author choose those words in that moment, and what were they trying to tell us, the audience? So one of the things that we're going to do as we read poetry is we're going to do what I call close reading. So we're going to look at every word and how they're constructed and see if we can figure out what the author was up to. So let's just go back. The great thing about poetry, as I've said before, is that we can read the poems more than once because they're so short. Well, let's start rereading this poem. Now, I'm not going to reread every word with you because I'm going to ask you to go do some stuff on your own first, and then we'll come back and discuss the poem again together. But let's look at the very first line. It says, what happens to a dream deferred? If you look, I've highlighted for you here the word deferred. And if you look over in the comments, it has a definition. Now it says, for deferred, it means to put off an action or event to a later time, to postpone. Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk about is, what are the reasons that something might be deferred? Well, something could be deferred because we choose to defer it. Like, I'm going to put this thing off because maybe I'm lazy and procrastinating. Sound familiar? Or maybe it's because I'm choosing to do something else. Or maybe it's because I can't get to it right now because I'm just too busy. But I think about the word deferred too. Something being put off or postponed isn't always up to me. Sometimes somebody defers something for me. Like, I'm forced to defer that thing. Okay, so now that we understand what the word deferred means, I want to go back to the word dream, because we've talked about this word already when we were reading the Juicy by Notorious B.I.G. The dream, something that isn't real, but something that we're hopeful that might be real one day. Well, it's something that, like, our ideal world, right? So what happens to a dream when it is postponed? So anytime that we see this word it in the poem, and we're going to see it a bunch of times, it's all referring back to the dream. So we have to think about, and not just any dream, but a dream that's been deferred. So what I want to do is look at each one of these comparisons. Now, I'm not going to look at all of them closely, but I'm going to look at the first one closely with you, and then I'm going to ask you to go back and look at any one of the other ones. There's going to be a brief assignment that goes with this video. Okay, so let's look at, I want to get rid of this so that we know now that it is referring to the dream that's been deferred. So I was hoping that would erase, but it won't, so that's cool. We'll just go with it. Okay, so does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? All right, so does a dream that's been postponed dry up like a raisin in the sun? Well, my first thought is, my son loves raisins because they're delicious, but I don't think that's exactly what he's talking about. So if it's drying up, when something dries up, it loses like all of its juiciness, which is funny because it relates back to the Biggie poem again. It loses all of its vitality, I would say, like its life. So like a raisin that's been left out in the sun, it gets all hard and crusty. It becomes unappetizing, something that I don't want. Now, it's probably not going to hurt me, right? But it's not something that I'm going to want to consume.